It's June 1941, and a little mischievous, mustached, one testicle-having German man is prepared to launch a full-scale invasion of his most coveted and sought-after prize. The motherfucking Soviet Union, baby. Adolf Hitler, during the years leading up to his assumption of power, had dreamed of defeating what he coined as Judeo-Bolshevism. It's already widely known that Hitler was not a particular fan of Jewish people. Besides being a huge believer and promoter of the extremely incorrect stabbed-in-the-back theory, or in short explanation, we lost World War I not because our people were starving, but because of those fucking Jews. Hitler also had a long list of wild conspiracy theories as to the extent of his so-called Jewish conspiracy. He believed that the Marxist ideology was inherently propped up and conceived by the Jews, and he wanted to rid the world of both. From his early days as an anti-Semitic angry dude who raged against the system, he knew that his fantasized future of Germany not only needed to expand west, but most of all east. In World War I, Russia had capitulated late into the war due to a sparking revolution that had been brewed up by an angry-looking bald man named Vladimir Lenin that the Germans sent back to Russia after he had been exiled, hoping that he would thrust Russia into chaos. And boy did he. Maybe what Hitler should have learned from the past is that just throw some angry, bald, ideological preacher back into Russia and the government will just fucking curl up and die.
Give me the bed. Give me the bed. Come on. Give me the bed. Give me the bed. Scaredy cat. Yeah.
But that's besides the point. This is speculation on my part for sure, but I think Hitler truly thought that if he just caused enough destruction and grabbed enough land, that the USSR would just say, I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man. But he was sadly mistaken. Because if there's one thing that's true about Joseph Stalin, the then leader of the USSR, is that fucker would rather have the Russian people be eradicated from the fucking face of the planet than capitulate. After years and months of conceptualization, the German High Command finally somewhat agrees on a plan. I'll explain the somewhat part shortly. The plan was to send 3 army groups into Russia. Army Group North in, well, the north. Army Group South in, you guessed it, the south. And finally Army Group Center in the, you wouldn't fucking believe it, the center, with various panzer groups supporting the gaps. Each group would take key targets and cities along the way, and the goal was to reach a region designated the, oh Jesus fuck, how am I going to pronounce this? Arkhangelsk-Astrakhan line, which was a front line that reached from Arkhangelsk in the north and in the south. The Germans knew that they couldn't conquer all of the Soviet Union in one go, and this area was believed to hold much of the Soviet supplies that Germany would need to continue. Because if there's one thing that you need to know about the Soviet Union, is that boy is fucking thick. This is where that somewhat agreeing part that I mentioned earlier comes into play. Much of the German High Command knew that there was not a long shot in hell that they could effectively resupply their troops with how deep they would be pushing into the Soviet Union. Germany at this time is relatively spread thin. They have taken up much of Europe, and their raw materials and food supplies are starting to look a wee bit fucked. They knew that to survive, they would need to rely on whatever they could get their hands on and capture in the USSR. Hitler, feeling cautious yet optimistic, was prepared to make those commies piss their red jorts. But boy oh boy, was he in for a real kick in the schnitzel. The invasion begins on the 22nd of June 1941, and it all goes terribly good. It started off pretty fucking good. The German armed forces pushed and took extremely key cities fairly quick. The Russians were caught off guard, and with much of the Red Army's commanders and leaders being mysteriously unalived or vanishing, wonder how that happened, the Red Army was not prepared to fight this war. Not only was the Red Army lacking leadership, they were totally unorganized, lacking important organization and resources. Russia had been particularly weary of a German invasion, but they did not really know when it was going to occur. Quickly, Germany managed to gain air superiority and was encircling and capturing massive, and I mean fucking massive, amounts of Red Army forces. As the German forces continued to advance, the Russians suddenly got a lot beefier. At the Battle of Smolensk, Germany had expected to roll in and take the place like they fucking owned it, but the Russians gave them a pretty good punch to the nuts, and yet the Germans still prevailed. However, by this point in the months following the beginning of the German invasion, the Germans were running hella low on supplies, yet they kept on chugging along. Finally, the Germans were planning to finally take Moscow. They marched along, and they didn't even make it into the city. Oh. By this point, Germany has lost nearly 1 million men, and the Russians managed to halt the German advance into the capital. And then all of a sudden, it started to rain. And then the Russians, they turned on the great AC unit in the sky, and it got hella fucking cold, man. With little to no supplies, especially winter clothing, food, and gas, Germany had a real oh shit moment. They knew they had to get it together, and quick. At this point, Hitler was like, hey yo, we need some motherfucking gas ASAP, Rocky.
Okay, that's not supposed to...
I know what's wrong with it. Ain't got no gas in it.
Luckily, Army Group South exists. Army Group South had the primary targets of taking the Caucasus oil fields and the railway hub of Stalingrad. The Battle of Stalingrad would be one of the longest running battles in history, and the German army would eventually be surrounded in the city and slowly picked off or starved to death. So ended Hitler's dream of taking the southern prime targets. At this point, Hitler is like, hey man, can't take this shit no more. So he deems the offensive a failure and begins to prepare his armies to halt any Soviet advance to retake the German claimed land. However, by this point, the Red Army is prepared to chew ass and kick some fucking bubblegum. Hey Hitler, how's the offensive going?
Oh. Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren. Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Well, good luck with that.
I squeeze, I squeeze, I squeeze.